pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you'll be seated. First item we have on the agenda is an approval of the official recessed agenda. Are there any additions, subtractions?
Mr. Mayor and Board, under Board's business, I guess Roman numeral 8, J is fine, a report from the Infrastructure Committee.
Any other adjustments? Do I hear an approval of the official recessed agenda then, with that addition?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We have several things. We had maybe a 500-year rain last night. We had our usual street of Maple Street. I understand that we had a house on the end of Maple Street that had approximately 4 feet of water in it, and we had cars floating in the street. I would like to suggest that one of the things that this city, well over a year ago, and I was reminded by Mr. McLaurin, that even in the last administration, there was an approval made to run one of the retention ponds and increase the size of the pipage from that retention pond that was behind the Kroger area all the way down to the retention pond that was behind J.C. Penney's. You have to get easements and things of that type for that. We have the pipe. We've had the pipe for over a year. We signed a letter and a proposal to the shopping center owners way back in June. We have yet to hear from them. Certainly there are things that we can do to help eliminate some of the excess of water. And the kind of rain that we had yesterday, sometimes it's quite difficult to do. I'd like to make a few other comments pertaining to Mr. Jimmy Gavin, who was a city employee who worked with the water department. Great guy, great personality. Passed away. He was only 50 years old. He will be greatly missed in this city. I've had the opportunities to work with him in the last year or so. Some good news. One thing, I just came back from the grand opening of Premier Radiology. It's one of the only ones functioning in the state of Mississippi. A year ago or so, in July, when we had the groundbreaking, there were 2. After Katrina, there wasn't any. Today, we have our new Premier Radiology Clinic that is will begin functioning very shortly. We're fortunate that we have another example of a homegrown product who's been very instrumental in getting this going. Dr. Vernon Barra, who grew up in Starkville, from Starkville, and has a sister still living here. We look forward to them being and participating in our community. Sales tax up again. Sales tax for the month of August were up 3.57%. Restaurant tax was up 10.77%. So we've had, in most months, a very positive situation each time that we've had a sales tax report. Any board members have anything they would like to say?
Just one quick comment. This is an announcement that the Oktibbeha County Humane Society Animal Shelter is now open on Saturdays from 10 to 2. This was a recommendation that came out of the budget process, and they were able to work their staffing to allow those Saturday hours to be more convenient for a lot of people who work. So just wanted to share that with everyone. That's real good news.
That's excellent. That means all those dogs around your house up there, you can call and have it picked up on Saturday, doesn't it?
I guess so.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I happened to be out at the animal shelter Saturday last for a quick little visit and saw the adoption of, 3 cats and 2 dogs while I was there. So I think it's an outstanding move to provide for some Saturday hours, more convenience to the citizenry.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I could jump back to your first comment talking about the drainage issues and the weather event last night, I would hope that, as we discussed this afternoon, you and I did, that you'll help facilitate finishing up that project on top of the hill, on top of Main Street up there behind the shopping center with all due haste. And also, if we could look at our maintenance and just routine maintenance of our culverts to make sure they are clear, and that we try to put in place a system where if we do have, and I understand that not all weather events announce themselves before they come, but if we have a little bit of forewarning, that we will get out and try to ensure that all our culverts are clear and can carry the maximum capacity through our ditches, and that they're not blocked, and would hope for you to help install that.
Interesting you brought that up, because I was just talking with the engineer about that this afternoon, and he raised a very good point about drainage and ditches and things of that type, that they can be very clear this time of the year.
Right.
And then if you have the type of rain that we had yesterday, where it just rained and rained and rained, they very quickly fill up with leaves and debris, and many of you have noticed that trees break the limbs off because they get soaked and they get washed into these clean drains that we might have, and they reclog up. And so it's an ongoing process. One of the things that Alderman Davis and I did talk about, I think it was a very good idea, is that we need we need city service and a standby crew for any type of drainage that we might need to, say, take care of in the middle of the night. And we hope that we can implement something like that and have a quick call number that we can get a fast response on. We hope that we can be better prepared in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It brings us to the approval of the minutes of the recess meeting of September the 12th and the regular recess meeting of September the 19th.
I guess if we take those separately,
Yes.
would move approval of the minutes of September 12th, 2006.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of September the 12th with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Let's have a discussion. Mr. Mayor and Board, we still have the same issues with the minutes that I raised the last time in terms of the need to rewrite those, and to the best of my knowledge, that has not been done yet.
I'd like to ask you a question in regard to, say, writing the minutes. Is this a preference on your individual part, or is this state law?
That's sort of a difficult question to answer. Very rarely in the writing of minutes for any type of organization do you have the body of the minutes in the title of the minutes and nothing in the body as to discussion and what was specified. The same question I raised last time, and they really need to be rewritten.
Well, part of the problem, as I see in regard to that, is that the board is very active in saying, and we're getting into a general discussion over a motion, and then we're fast to say, and I want that in the form of a motion. Now, if you go back in and you listen to the tape, you're sitting there and you're doing a complete story, that becomes a part of a motion. I feel like one of the ways to maybe correct that is that if we don't disallow the discussion being the motion.
I'm not really referring to discussion being a motion. The motions are, for the large part, not always, but generally very specifically stated. I'm talking about the fact that within the body of the minutes, there is no specific discussion of what occurred, what is attempting to be done, the actual motion, but instead some of the verbiage appears in the title to the minutes, which come as the last thing that is normally written with minutes after you do the body of the motion. You can look through these and see exactly what I'm talking about. The minutes just simply are not properly done.
Mr. McLaurin, let me ask you a question. Do you have the proper format that these minutes should be prepared in? Why I'm asking you this, I had the occasion to look at 5 different sets of minutes of the surrounding area in Jackson, Mississippi, and none of these 5 minutes resemble each other. So evidently there is not a one format that the minutes should be written. And I'd like you to present us with what you call the correct format for the minutes.
Would be happy to do that, Alderman Mills.
Well, we've been talking about this for months. Now let's do something.
Well, that's not a subject normally that would be discussed with the board, but if you would like to see a proper style for minutes, I'll be happy to furnish it to you.
Well, I'd like to see
have discussion with
because we're
those
wasting
at City
time
Hall that
every
are
meeting
involved.
talking about the format of the minutes. And we just don't need to do that.
All of a sudden, in the last several sets of minutes, the format has pretty much completely changed.
We have a motion with a second. Do we have further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of September the 12th, raise your hand, please. All those opposed? Thank you. This brings us down to the the minutes of September the 19th.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval of the minutes of the recess meeting of September 19th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that we approve the minutes of September the 19th, and did you want to say something about this?
My same objection holds. Nobody to my knowledge, perhaps with the exception of Alderman Perkins, has been sitting in federal court where the federal judge directed the city to present the minutes of particular meetings and so forth, and then you would understand in the midst of a very tense situation where there is the possibility of considerable personal liability on the part of individual aldermen, you would understand the importance of a careful writing of the minutes.
Are you suggesting that West Point, Columbus, and Louisville, and Jackson have never been to federal court?
Certainly not. Did I say that?
No, but you
So
suggested
we got
the
case
format
law
of
on
minutes.
this, Mr. McLaurin?
Alderman Mills just said that there was some difference in minutes written by cities, and certainly I would agree with that. There is, however, a standardization where the body of the minutes contain what is directed as opposed to nothing in the body of the minutes, and that attempted to be put in a title to the minutes.
Can we produce case law where this has been brought to federal court?
Where what has been brought to
A
federal
case
court.
to question the format of the minutes of a city.
Certainly we can. Anyone that has been on the Board of Aldermen that has been sitting in federal court where the judge directed the minutes produced and then talked about, well, the minutes don't really say what you're saying, they said, would see the importance of a careful drafting of the minutes.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to accept September 19th minutes. Do we have any further discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Mrs. Self, did you want to vote?
No, Mayor, I don't, because I do have some problems with some of the language in this. And my problem that I've stated from the very beginning on the board regarding the minutes is not the format, but the content. And I do know that minutes reflects action. And that's what, if we're ever questioned, it's going to be on the action, not the format.
Thank you, ma'am. It passes 4-2, and I suppose you vote just abstain, is that correct?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, thank you. Citizen comments. We allow this particular time for citizens to come forward to have no more than 3 minutes.
Good evening to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. My name is Alvin Turner. I'm Ward 7. The citizens have a couple of concerns. A week ago, we had an incident in Rolling Hill with a pit bull dog that they had to kill. The citizens are very afraid of these pits and rock rollers and whatever running loose. And we don't have the authority to discharge the firearm in the city. And so if we run across one, we're just in jeopardy. We would just like to know what we would have to do or what we would do to the owner of the animal. And we, with the time soon to change, it'll be dark early. We are enjoying the city transit, south and north route, but we have just a few things. We would like to have some bus stops if we could, and we have a problem with people talking on cell phone, putting in front of the bus. And that is a very dangerous situation for us.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Any other citizens this time would like to come forward to say something?
Good evening.
If you'll state your name and what ward you live in.
Wilson Ashford, Ward 4.
How you doing this afternoon?
Doing fine. No, I didn't come to talk about the one-way street. Still don't like it. Still is a hindrance to me in my business. But my question and maybe I should wait the board business, but maybe some of these things will be answered in that, but if they're not answered in the board business when you come to the Oddfellow Cemetery, maybe you can fill us in on it, and that is, we know that's a historical.
That's right.
We don't know what you can do and what you can't do in the situation. We need at least a printout on some, so we'll know how to handle those situations. Also, in the proposal that we had, what we presented to you, we want to know how much of that has been done and how much you can do, okay? Also, yesterday I think they were trying to have they was having a funeral burial up there, and they couldn't get the vault up there for some reason. Now the question is, the next question is, maybe I should wait the board business, but if it's not in that board business when it comes to that, that's the reason I'm talking now, that you could answer these questions. Maybe some of these will be answered in that presentation of the report on the long-range plan for the Oddfellow Cemetery. Maybe they would be answered, but if they're not answered, then we would like to have an answer for it if it's possible. And then, have you, by any chance, considered a road in that situation?
I think Ms. Brule has that information, and we've talked about it, and she will give that presentation. She's kind of taken that particular ball and is looking at all various aspects of it.
Okay. I think that would be my comment.
Thank you.
I'll just sit down. My name's Lyle Wirt. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, my mom, and my dad. I live in Ward 1. In fact, I live about 4 houses down from Alderman Davis here. Mr. Mayor really hit it on the nail this evening. We had about 500 years worth of rain last night, and most of the rain on the cul-de-sac end of Douglas MacArthur Drive opposite of Stark Road. We received the majority of that water in our driveway. It's not like nights like last night. It's practically every night it rains, we have a lake in our driveway. We have to move our cars up the street. We have to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. My mom only got 2 hours of sleep last night because she had to move our cars and stay in our couch all night to make sure that her brand new Chevy Aveo didn't get water in it. And in fact, my car got a little water in it. And there's no way to know if there's water in our driveway unless she wakes up at midnight and finds water in our driveway. There is a pipe behind a resident in our cul-de-sac. He's 2 houses to the right of me, or to the left of me, that there is an open drain from the storm drain on the L corner of Plum Street. There's an open drain, and we'd like to see that closed. I don't care if you tear up our street. I don't care if you tear up anything. We just don't want water in our driveway. And I'm sure that the 3 residents that live to each side of me don't want water in their driveways either because they got water in their driveways. In fact, the whole cul-de-sac had water last night, and I could probably go out and have a midnight swim if I wanted to. Frankly, we're just getting tired of it. We've lived in that house for 4 years and nothing's been done, and we'd just like to see something done. I'm going to be leaving in January for a 2-year church mission, and I'd like to see in those 2 years something being done, because after that's elections. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Ward, let me say that you raised some very important concerns with us, and I am of the opinion that there are some very pressing infrastructure needs that need to be done in our city, and hopefully that this board will start moving in a direction where we'll start giving priority budgeting and funding to infrastructure. And that's one of the many complaints I've been hearing across the city: infrastructure needs for drainage, ditches and streets and other matters in the city. So hopefully this board will start giving us some priority funding as opposed to not giving it the attention that it deserves. So hopefully this administration and the board will find a remedy to your situation in your ward.
That's what I'd like to see, some priority, because I think that although I think the house on Maple Street got 4 feet of place, it's way in front of us. Like I said, we've had this problem for 4 years. I'm sure the resident on Maple Street has had that problem for 4 years, but I think we're kind of next in line, in my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening to the board. Good evening to the mayor, and also to my alderman, Ward 6.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you.
I'm Dorothy Isaac, and I'm coming before you from the Parks and Recreation Department as a commissioner. I've been a commissioner on the park for quite a number of years now, and I would just like to say that creating new people, to the Park and Recreation, that's fine. I'm all in favor of that because each ward should be represented, but we should be representatives. We should be able to represent our viewpoint, of what we would like to go on in the Park and Recreation. And when each one of you were elected, we were given the tours of coming on the park, going with you and letting you see how the operation flow and everything. I don't think you have had any problems out of, the commissioners. But I would just like to say, if it's not broke, please don't try to fix it. Just leave the park commission as it is. Put on the representatives. I'm for everybody to represent. I'm for that. But we're here to tend to the needs of our children, our adults, and also our parks. We invite anybody to come to the meetings. They're open. Our meetings are open. And we would like to say, if it's not broke, please try not to fix it, but just take care of it. Thank you.
Anyone else that'd like to speak? Okay, that brings us down to a couple of public presentations, and the first being the Visitors Bureau budget. How y'all doing?
Good afternoon.
Thank y'all for having us tonight. I'll start out presenting the budget. Does everybody have a copy in hand? First line item, the revenue from the hotel tax. We increased that a little bit this year because we know some growth is obviously happening in Starkville, more hotels. The county hotel fee is our marketing contract with Microtel. The $6,000 is all of the Microtel contract. Moving down to the expenses with our management contract, obviously we have an increase there with possible raises, more employees, benefits, and so forth. Moving down to the 2% food and beverage, stayed the same in that manner. Below that is a matching grant that we did not get, probably because the state tourism cut its budget. So unfortunately did not get that grant. And below that, the expenses is for the 2% food and beverage. Most everything stayed the same. Drastic amount that was cut was our advertising dollars because of the grant was not accepted. Pretty much everything else stayed the same. And the retirement development at the bottom, we'd like the help of that to stay at, it's got to stay at least 10,000 for us to stay certified for a retirement community. And I'll turn it over to Arma.
Those are our line items for the upcoming year, and just to tell you some of the highlights of what happened this past year with our budget from last year is, of course, one of our biggest expense besides advertising is our sponsorship line item. Our major events that we sponsor are Bulldog Bash at 1,500 that had an economic impact of about $1.5 million. So for every dollar that we spent on that sponsorship, we received back about $1,000. The entity that we give the most sponsorship money to is the Mississippi Horse Park. We gave them $12,000 last year. The economic impact for last year was $3 million. So for every dollar we spent at the horse park, we received back about $250. Cotton District Arts Festival, we gave them $5,000 for a return on investment of $250 with an economic impact of $1.25 million. They had their largest crowd this year, and I think that's due to a lot of different things, but you know, we did have the sweet tea competition, we had a baseball game that year, plus celebrating festivals was there. The Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, we sponsored that event at $3,000 cash plus promotional items and brochures. Their economic impact was $2.25 million for a return on investment of about $750. Every time there's a wedding, a reunion, or some type of meeting on campus, we give out welcome bags. For the 2005-2006 year, that had an economic impact of about $500,000 total. As you can see from our budget, we have a $10,000 promotional line item, so that's about a $50 return on investment for every dollar that we give them. We're sponsoring all the same events this year, even though we're about $2,000 lower on our line item. We're going to up our sponsorship for Bulldog Bash. We've added the Starkville Community Theater, the Nokomis Art Gallery, the Black Hills Festival, and we're continuing to support the ones mentioned before, as well as Downtown Association. We're going to have a sports marketing program, and of course we always support the Historic Preservation Month. Just to give you an overview, our hotel tax is doing very well. Our average occupancy, according to Smith Travel, was 80% this past year, and our average daily rate was about $76.32. Other than sponsorships and advertising and our other form of marketing, Starkville is attending trade shows. I go to various travel trade shows as well as meeting and convention trade shows. And our focus for 2006-2007 is to beef up our retirement development program, our sports marketing, and continue to recruit small meetings and conventions that aren't necessarily associated with departments out on campus.
Anyone got questions?
Or a couple questions. You mentioned the occupancy rate about 80%. What is good? Is that great? Is 85% great? What do we see kind of across Mississippi as something?
Across Mississippi, not looking at hotel or casinos, the average rate is anywhere between 65 to 75. So we're above average. We're doing very well here.
And I know the Hilton Garden has been working on that. So it seems like there is a need for hotel rooms here in Starkville.
A need for, yes, hotel rooms and not motel rooms.
You talked about the retirement development being a big initiative for this year, but just based on the numbers, it seemed like we were designating the same amount of money as last year. How will we increase our efforts with the same amount of money? Just going to work smarter, or?
Right, work smarter, maybe with a more active retirement committee. We can do some more fundraising and show that we do have an active program so that people will buy in to the program. And then, of course, there is a retirement grant program, and it's just getting more money from there as well. Thank you.
Other questions?
Have to motion.
Do I-
Motion to approve this.
You need a motion for us to approve your budget that's been presented to us. Do we have a motion to approve the budget that has been presented to us this evening?
So moved.
Second.
We
Thank
have a
you.
motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is from Starkville in Motion on a safe routes to schools. How are you this afternoon?
I'm well, thanks. My name is Lois Connington, and I am the chair of the Safe Routes to Schools Committee of Starkville in Motion. Safe Routes to Schools is an international movement that has recently come to the forefront in the U.S. in response to increasing childhood obesity levels, and at 40%, Mississippi's children rank first in the nation. As well as environmental concerns, the federal government has made funding available to all 50 states for annual grants to communities to establish safe routes to schools. Communities commonly employ such infrastructure improvements as bike paths, sidewalks, traffic calming devices, signals and flashers, and road markings when laying out these routes. The grant will also fund public education and encourage programs such as bike and pedestrian safety, school crossing guards, safety patrol programs, and in-class activities. The grant dollars will come from the Federal Safety Loop Transportation Enhancement Fund via the Mississippi Department of Transportation over the 5-year course of the grant program. These grants target children in grades 4 through 8. In Starkville, those students attend Ward Stewart Elementary School, Henderson Intermediate School, and Armstrong Middle School. Infrastructure improvements must be located within 2 miles of a target school. With help from the Landscape Architecture program at MSU, we are geocoding student addresses and generating maps that quantify the number of students living within 2 miles of each of these schools. In the 1970s, 80% of U.S. school children walked or rode bikes to schools. The situation is now drastically reversed. Starkville in Motion is just completing a survey of all 4th through 8th graders that indicates that no students from Ward Stewart or Henderson currently bike to or from school, and only a handful walk. At Armstrong, up to 32 students walk to or from school, and about a dozen ride their bikes. If we can secure this grant and establish a Safe Routes to Schools program in Starkville, we can significantly raise these numbers. Dr. Birchfield, Superintendent of Schools, has written a letter of support that is included in your handout. We have met with both the school board and the individual principals of the schools, and they are now in favor of this grant application. With help from school district personnel, we are working now to identify improvements and programs at each school. We envision a grant application that will be between $75,000 and $150,000. The grants can be carried over more than 1 year, which means that the burden of expenditure to the city will be reduced. There is no municipal match required. The grant is entirely funded by MDOT, but it is a reimbursement grant. As with the Lynn Lane grant proposal, members of Starkville in Motion will prepare the grant application, but the city of Starkville would submit it to MDOT. We are asking for your approval tonight to move forward with this process. In November, we will bring the completed grant application to this board for final approval before submitting it to MDOT by the December 1, 2006 deadline. I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight and welcome any questions.
Questions from board members?
Lois, just really more of a comment. Appreciate all the work that y'all have done with Starkville in Motion to get us to this point. I can really think of nothing more important than providing safe routes to schools for our kids, and this is one of those areas where we can use these type of grants to provide for infrastructure needs that we might not otherwise afford. So we appreciate y'all doing all the legwork, and what we did with the Lynn Lane grant, which we still have not heard back from MDOT on, is that tonight we would provide a preliminary approval to move forward with the process, and then y'all would come back later on prior to the December 1st application deadline. Is there any support that you would see that we would need from the city at this point to help move this along? I imagine there's some engineering services.
One thing definitely, Bill Webb, if we could have his help in determining a lot of things, but would be critical,
okay,
if that's possible.
And Bill, I know you helped, dramatically helped us with the Lynn Lane grant with your expertise, and I'd like to propose a motion that we give preliminary approval to this grant and authorize the use of city resources as we've discussed here tonight to help in completion of that grant. The final approval of that grant would be at the last meeting in November. While Starkville Motion is putting together the grant on behalf of the city, it's ultimately the responsibility of the city to file that grant. So I'll be a little more succinct, Tammy, on the motion. It's just that we offer preliminary approval for this grant process, and that we authorize the use of city resources as necessary to complete it.
Second.
We have a motion with a second.
Discussion.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to support this motion, but I would like to see in our packet, as our rules and procedures require, the materials that we require for people making public appearances before us. And I'd just like to read this ahead of time. I think she was reading from some handout that may...
Right, that we didn't have available, obviously.
Yes, and our rules require that we have this ahead of time.
I agree with you.
Yes, sir, but I'm going to support it, but we need to follow the rules.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, Lois. It brings us down to a public hearing. Number one, public hearing on the adoption of a policy concerning the use of crosswalks and speed tables. Did you say that last meeting, we didn't have to have a public hearing?
Right, don't have to, but Bill Webb was going to give us some more information on
Right.
this and a presentation. Not in this set of material.
Well, I'm sure there was one forwarded to you. Is that not right, Mr. Brewer?
In the packet? Maybe I overlooked it.
Basically, we see the need for a policy controlling the location and how to go about putting speed bumps or speed tables as well as crosswalks. We have all the time requests from people to slow traffic down in my neighborhood, and they want a speed bump, which is, as you'll recall, is the little things about 6 inches tall that really kind of rearrange your front end when you go over them. And we came up with a policy that is meeting some good success in other cities, and it is included, or hopefully it's included in your packet. It has been and passed out. Basically, this elusive policy. Tell they read up on this before they get here.
Do what?
They can tell you read up on this before we get here.
We do normally, but, we don't. But if it's not in the packet, it's somewhat difficult. Wait a minute.
Okay. Mislabeled, huh?
Mislabeled. It is behind the 88.
Okay. Both of them in the same, but there's two different documents, one relatively three or four pages and one fairly thick one.
Let's see.
Matt, the one you're looking at is the crosswalk, and there should be another one that's about 3 or 4 pages. That's the speed table.
This appears to just be crosswalk.
Might want to reschedule that.
Yeah. Let's reschedule this presentation since we don't have the document.
You want to talk about the crosswalks?
No, let's keep
Neither
it
one.
all together.
Do I have a motion that we reschedule?
I would move we reschedule the discussion for the next meeting.
Do we have a second? All those in favor say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Brings us down to, the public hearing on consideration of amendment to the ordinance creating the Parks and Recreation Commission, setting the requirements for membership, establishing the authority of the commission. We've already heard from, Ms. Dorothy Isaac over here, her concerns, feeling that, perhaps we should expand, the membership to be on a per alderman basis or board basis.
Mayor, can we speak now concerning this?
Yes, come up, speak.
I'm Dan Moreland. Been involved with the parks probably longer than a lot of you have been alive. Not bragging, I'm just complaining. We first started playing at Sutterth Field. Any of y'all know where Sutterth Field was?
Oh, yeah.
Over behind Fort Sutter School was built 40 years ago. So I consider myself somewhat familiar with the park situation. We have last year, my daughters play ball, travel ball. We played in 15 states. I've been to a lot of parks. I've seen a lot of situations. We've got the best situation here right now that we have ever had. We've got good people. We've got good facilities. We need more facilities. We've got a proposal right now for somebody to donate 200 acres of land to us, to the parks, provided the parks can control it. We're in the process of wanting to build a new gym, which we should have already started on, and all of you that's in the building business, especially you, Mayor, know that the longer you put it off, the more it's going to cost you. If y'all table this gym, which some of the board members have made a statement that that's what they want to do, if you table this gym, we're talking about 2 basketball courts, racquetball, handball, amphitheater out back, the whole 9 yards. We've got the drawings. The longer we wait and put it off, the more it's going to cost us. And y'all know that to be a fact. It's been that y'all take the 2% away from us and give us the 2 meals. Well, the 2 meals would come up to $360,000. You can't operate on $360,000 on park improvements and building things and anything like that. We've got a good facility. If we don't maintain it, we won't continue to have a good facility. It'll just go back in. Tupelo right now is building one that will make ours look bad. But we're not competing with Tupelo. We want to keep ours the best we can do. And I kind of disagree with Dorothy on the 7 commissioners deal. It doesn't matter how many you have. as long as you get the best people you can get whenever you advertise for the thing. Whether they're all from one ward or all from the other ward, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. When the police department hires policemen, they don't hire 3 from this ward and 3 from that one and 3 from that one. They get the best people they can find. Same way with the rest of the department. So my position is, if you want to have 7, fine, but you're going to cut out some good people because there's already one in there, and you're going to take on one that's not. And Mr. McLaurin, you've been on the park commission, you know exactly. If you put names on there just to fill slots, you hadn't done anything. But, and I go back to what Dorothy said, if it is not broke, don't fix it. And I've been in politics before. Some of you sitting here will be elected next year, some of you won't. We'll have, if y'all take this commission over, and they have to come up here every time that we need to do something, every time a light bulb goes out, it's going to fall by the wayside. And then every 4 years, you're going to have to start over. And like we've got it right now, it's working fine. We've got the best crew we've ever had. We've got the best people because we're allowed to hire our people. And if you leave it like this, leave it alone, and leave the money alone, because in my opinion, and I know that I'll probably roll off the next time by making the statement I'm fixing to make, but that's okay. I got to do what I think's best for the kids in Starkville and the Park Commission. It's all about controlling the 2% money. And the 2% money was voted in for the parks. We've got senior citizens down there that come to square dances, to crocheting, to quilting, to everything else, up to 4-year-old t-ball. We cover everybody, and we spend as much time with them as we need to spend. But if you'll stop and think about it, if y'all take the 2% away from us and all, then we're going to be back just like anybody else, and we're not going to be able to function. And y'all will have killed a real good park situation. You said the restaurant tax was up. I mean, she said the restaurant tax was up to 2%. I mean, 10.77%. The money's going to come in, but it takes a lot of money to operate and to build what we want to build. Now, when we first started on this gym, I was kind of opposed to it, to the fact that we would have to have so many more people to staff it. But we worked with Mr. Schaefer and them and got it into the situation we was going to combine all of the gym and move the offices over there so the people in the daytime could run the gym and we wouldn't have to hire extra people for it. We have spent the time to think this thing through, and we will make it something that Starkville will be proud of if y'all will just leave it alone like it is. And I quote like Dorothy said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
Anyone else that'd like to speak in regard to this public hearing regarding the Parks Rec?
I'm Marnita Henderson, and I live in Ward 1, and I've been attending Board of Aldermen meeting for the past 7 years. I've been coming here when the board, for the Park Commission before it became a board, and they came up here every Tuesday night. They had a list. They'd sit here for an hour, listing all the things they needed, all the things they had to do. And Mr. McLaurin led the charge, more or less, to make this into a board where they were self-contained and they took care of it. I've never heard them come back and ask for a single dollar. They're given a budget, they take care of it every year, and I think our park facilities are wonderful, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any board members?
Mayor, I'd like to say something. I think some very valid points have been made, and concerning the appropriation of funds, I don't think that we necessarily need to get involved in changing that, or even the commission's authority to spend those funds. The one area that I would say I do feel somewhat differently on, though, is the idea of having someone from every ward on the commission. And I say that because, as was said earlier tonight, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But George Evans Park, which is in my ward, was broke, and fixing it was one of the reasons that I ran for office. Now, it's looking a lot better now. It's a lot safer. I've been really impressed. There's still more room for improvement, and I would really, really like to have someone from my ward, perhaps even one of George Evans' relatives who's living in my ward, on the commission, because I know they would have that park's best interest at heart. It's something that I would take very seriously, and those same senior citizens that were mentioned earlier that go square dancing used to go square dancing in George Evans, but had to leave because they felt it wasn't safe anymore. And so I'm not in favor of changing the authority given to the commission, but I do think that it should have a representative from every ward.
Could I say one more thing? You said about fixing up the parks and all, and we had everything lined out like it was supposed to be, like we wanted to do, priorities down, and then y'all come down and took $70,000 out of our budget. You know, I don't know about y'all, but $70,000 hitting anybody's budget cut you down pretty good.
Just a couple clarifying comments. I appreciate the speakers tonight. That there was a couple of things that may be misunderstood. One, the proposal at hand was an effort to increase representation on the Park and Rec Commission across the city, and I still believe in that. The issue of whether the commission should be autonomous or advisory comes from some legal issues, which I'll go into in a minute. But I think there's been a misunderstanding if someone believes that we believe we can operate the parks on 2 mills. That we currently are funding over 5 mills out of the general fund, and that's about $900,000, and that's prior to the almost $500,000 that we invest in the parks from the 2%. So what we're talking about is how do we make the parks better, and I think one way you do that is through fair representation across the city. But the legal issues that we're facing, and one of the reasons why the original proposal was made, state law, and Rodney or Alderman Davis, if you have some additional thoughts, dictates that a Park and Rec Commission can only be 3 or 5 members. So as of right now, as we currently understand it, it doesn't allow for fair representation across a community like Starkville. Don't believe that's a final impediment. But then the next thing is, if you do try to do what we did, which was to create an advisory commission, then you have questions of the way the 2% tax was established was directed to a Park and Rec Commission. So now if you go with an advisory commission so that you can allow your 7 members, now there's some questions you have to potentially ask the legislator to change a local and private agreement to establish that the money be directed to park improvements as opposed to a specific body. And so that's where we are. Tonight, when we got into the board discussion area, that is in essence what we would have talked about, not proposing any action tonight. But I appreciate what's been said here tonight. What we're talking about is how do we make the parks better. This is not an issue of money. The money is currently directed toward parks improvement. They would be directed toward park improvement in the future. And I think anytime we're contributing over almost $1.5 million today towards our parks, I hope that our commitment as a board and a community is very clear. Rodney, did I summarize the legal issues that we're facing? Fair enough. And Alderman Davis, obviously I learned a lot from you at the last meeting on
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
And I appreciate what Alderman Davis said, and I do get some of the calls, and Clark knows this, about the light bulbs not being in Westside Park. And I do want to say to the commissioners that I do appreciate you. You are doing a good job. No, Ward 7 is not represented. And I feel that if I wait and be patient, that one day Ward 7 will be represented, understanding that we can only have 5 commissioners. And I wanted to be clear that the proposed ordinance is referred to as we, that I am not a part of that we. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes?
I just need something clarified. The commission cannot function legally with more than 5 members.
I believe that's what he's saying. Is that not correct?
Not as a park commission
Not as-
constituted under the state
It
statute.
would be considered advisory if we made more members, what you're saying?
That would have to be done if such were the proposal, yeah.
Any other questions pertaining to the parks, Rick? Then I call the hearings, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
I call the hearings
Then
closed.
I have a motion.
All right, do you have a motion?
Right, I would move that the board deny the proposed ordinance number 2006-10 to repeal ordinance number 1983-1, establishing an advisory park and recreation commission and establishing the powers and duties thereof.
Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Have a motion with a second that we deny.
Alderman McLaurin, let me make sure I understand the procedure. We just had a public hearing, and your motions to deny, is that ordinance up for consideration?
Alderman Perkins has been on the agenda twice for consideration. If you'll remember, the last time it was put off under the grounds of the need and desirability of having a public hearing. It appears again in the packet in draft form. I would simply like to go on record denying adoption of this ordinance.
Why are we lengthening our discussion when it's not necessary? I mean, the ordinance is not, I heard your discussion, but the ordinance is not even before us. It's on the agenda. We could just pass over it.
Pass over, not even vote on it.
It's not necessary.
That, of course, we could do.
Yeah, but-
I would like to go on record.
Well, let's withdraw
denying
it. Let's withdraw it and go on. No need to withdraw this. Our agenda's long enough. Would you
We have
please
a motion
withdraw
on the floor with a second, and we need to go ahead and vote for the motion in the second. We can do that, and we go on, Mr. Perkins.
We'll be moving right along.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
We have 2 nays. Is it necessary to count hands? Okay. That brings us down to the mayor's business. Tonight, I would like for consideration of placing the code compliance field officer and the code compliance clerk on the authority and organization of the police department. When I first became the mayor, I talked to friends of mine that were on the board of Tupelo, and they had their code compliance people were policemen, in which they indicated it was very effective. It has been questioned that we need to do this. If you take the Attorney General's opinion, a code compliance person that is not attached to the police department or part of the police department cannot write tickets legally for any of the codes or the issues that which the city has placed or ordinance. Only if you're under the auspices of the police department can you write these tickets legally and get them get the process implemented. That's one of the reasons we felt like that that would be a good change to put the code compliance people under jurisdiction of the police department. I'll open it for discussion. And I know that Mr. Cox and I have talked about this, And what is happening is that the job description is getting much more than just say cutting yards and some of these things. Now, we're presently working on looking at houses that need to be removed from the community, and I believe that you have a list of how many houses at this particular point. 17 houses. And you know, we got, if we're gonna make a move to clean our city up, we're gonna have to have some authority in order to enforce some of these issues.
Haven't we addressed over 600 code compliance issues since we established the department over a year ago?
What I have on record right now is around 565.
Okay. And do I understand the representation that since they didn't, the code compliance team didn't have police power, that those actions were invalid?
Those actions were fine. Those are what we were able to close out. There are a lot more that we have dealt with, but we can't act with the authority that we need to solve it. Those have been the ones that voluntarily we've been able to close out.
And what we're getting to now is a situation where you go put a ticket on a drunk car, they just move to another part of town. And what I was told, that this is just going, they're playing a kind of hopscotch type of thing, of moving junk cars. They're going to be in front of your house next before you realize it.
Then we will deal with it.
And then when you deal with it, right.
But I guess where I'm a little confused is I understand Tupelo has a joint department with the police department as well as the building department, but as I look at other communities, Oxford, for example, these functions are managed through the code compliance office and actually specifically the building department. And we just went through an exercise where we talked about if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Here we have something that has clearly been successful. I'm uncomfortable with a representation that we need to arm our code compliance officers to do the things that we've asked them to do. This is clearly a success story for our community. We've made a significant investment, and I think perhaps if we would establish some job descriptions and have a little more detail, I'd feel more comfortable with being able to consider the recommendation.
Mr. Faber, have you had a chance to research this matter at all? There are all sorts of implications. There does exist a process whereby codes can be enforced through certain specific statutory processes that do not necessarily require the services of a police officer in the initial stages of the thing. Would like to hear some more research on this. Chief Lindley, any thoughts you have at this particular point since it's just now sort of popped up?
We've been talking about it.
We've been talking about it for several weeks. We're fixing to get into a phase of enforcement now that's somewhat more complicated than what we have been in the past. Now, if code compliance runs into any problems, they contact regular uniformed officers to come and assist them in whatever the difficulties may be. There is a precedent set for this due to the fact that animal control, which is another sub-enforcement unit of the city, is under the police department jurisdiction now. As a matter of fact, the vehicles are marked similarly and we uniform them similarly. What you get into is the fact that in order for the code compliance and animal control officer to actually be able to issue citations and enforce these laws, they have to be sworn in by the judge. So they are a quasi-police officer, and that's a very difficult position for them to be in right now. Most chiefs, to be honest with you, do not want this under the police department because it is a source of enforcement that draws negative feelings from the community. If you get out and do things like pull cars or tear houses down or any one of a number of things. So most chiefs would not want it. I'm willing to accept that under my control because these officers, animal control and code compliance, are already sworn in and are using our authority anyway. And it would be easier, I believe, to do this. Now, I also think we would need to have a shared span of control between the police and the city planner or whoever's over that department. But to clear up the legal aspect of it, I think if, for instance, this young man sitting here is a certified police officer, an academy graduate. He's actually been through the police academy and served as a police officer before he became a code compliance officer. So in this particular case, you already have a certified police officer that is acting as a code enforcement officer with no further training required. If we in fact inherit this, then I would like to take it another step and also send the animal control officer to the academy, the regular police academy, where he can be a fully functional officer, and they don't have to rely so much on us. They can go on and do these things that they need to do without calling us in. They're both capable of doing it, and I think it would be not only beneficial to them, but also be of help to us as well.
Mr. Sullivan, did you ever serve as code compliance officer in Pearl, where you were from?
The job description that we had in Pearl was a building inspector and code compliance officer. We did both within the city at the same time.
Was that under the police, or was it separate or shared?
It was under the building department. However, one of the problems that we had there, as Mr. Chief Lindley stated, the police chief in Pearl did not want this position under his department. One of the problems that we dealt with there is we started getting domestic violence calls, animal control calls, things like that within the building department that they would send us out on, and we had no control or authority over. That was one of the issues that we dealt with there.
So it's been your experience then that this is also better handled?
It's much better handled underneath the police department.
Is it not also the experience that the 560 cases we've had at this particular point have been pretty easy cases?
They have been easy cases, sir, and they've been voluntary at this point.
Code compliance, as we are fixing to attempt to do it, I believe, according to the plan and from what I understand, is relatively a new territory in Starkville. And Starkville is almost the wild, wild west. We just haven't had much in the past to fall back on. And I can see where these officers, in particular code compliance, are going to run into some difficult situations as we start trying to regulate more and more of these situations. Because to be frank with you, some of these ordinances that we're fixing to try and enforce are not going to be particularly user-friendly in the enforcement of it. And that's the position that you're asking this young man to place himself in. So we would be willing to accept this as an additional responsibility if the board so chooses. And I would recommend that it do it. That's up to the pleasure of the board.
Does this officer constitute the enrollment of compliance officers? Will he be armed with weapons and this type of thing?
Could be. I mean, there's no necessity for that. I certainly would think if he's going to be a regular police officer, you would need to arm him. He's already uniformed as a police officer now.
Well, I mean, the past compliance officer, he didn't wear a gun, did he?
No, sir, but he could have. He chose not to.
But he was a certified policeman.
No, sir, his certification had expired.
Okay, he's expired.
He was retired. This is the first time we've truly had an opportunity to implement this as it could be due to the fact that this young man has already been through the police academy.
Any other questions?
I'm in favor of it as long as there are no legal issues with it.
And I'm against it I just don't think we need to ask our code compliance officers to be wearing guns. I think the impact in the community far exceeds the benefits, and I'd like to have Mr. Favor review this and make a recommendation, or make a report, to us at our next meeting, if you think that would be sufficient time.
I think it would. I'd rather him wear a gun than me, though.
I might ask for some direction and guidance, and here's what I would ask y'all to consider. If we're going to continue to put code compliance officers in visibly marked vehicles that say law enforcement code compliance, and they're going to be wearing uniforms, and they're going to be actively enforcing the law, then they should be given all the assets that they require in order to do this. Now, if the board so chooses not to, then I think we need to put them back in an unmarked vehicle with nothing on it but City of Starkville and ununiform them, because right now they are something that they can't be one of the, they either need to be one or the other. And the direction I was given by Mr. Rummel when he was here was an armed, uniformed code compliance officer.
Chief, did the board ever authorize for these compliance officers to be uniformed? Is there anything on the books from this board that?
I have no idea.
Saying that?
I have no idea. I just absorbed this into my own budget when Mr. Rummel asked me to do this, because he was trying to get the code compliance into a more proactive state.
I think it's been suggested that Mr. Faber review this, see what the legal connotations would mean in regard to this, and maybe at the next meeting you could have us some review of this. Is that right? Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Brings us down to board business. David, for the application for a matching CDBG grant request.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Board, Mr. Faber, we're here. Myself and Stuart Vance. Stuart Vance represents this board in our community on the Golden Triangle Regional Airport Authority. We're here to talk to you about an opportunity to support a $43 million project with just a little help from the city to grow American Eurocopter by 150 jobs. These are $55,000 a year jobs on average. Just now, over 1 in 5 of the current 139 employees of American Eurocopter reside in Oktibbeha County. Of course, we have an opportunity as the growth occurs over the next couple of years to see more of those as residents of Oktibbeha County. So as a co-owner of the airport, we're just asking for a new regulation that MDA has put into place because of competition for community development block grants, that there be a 10% local match. And as a percentage owner of the airport, this is $6,500. That's half of the original match, or the total match, but the GTRA authority, Mr. Vance has helped, has decided to pay half of that $65,000. We would like to have some $65,000 total. $6,500 is your request of this board. The Golden Triangle Regional Airport, the whole area, which you are a co-owner, is growing, and I know that Stuart would like to tell you a little bit about the activities there, if you could take a few minutes.
Just a quick heads up, Mayor. Several recent developments you might be interested in. The Airport Board purchased an additional 40 acres of land adjoining Golden Triangle Airport today. We learned today that the airport road should be 4-laned complete by the end of next year. The MDOT has given us great cooperation on that, all the way from Highway 82 down to the Artesia Road, because Cervical is going to be running about 300 trucks a day down there, and they're planning on producing some steel beginning in July. The third item of interest is that American Eurocopter should come out from under their objection by their competitors next Monday and be ready to go to bid on building the additional facility out there to manufacture helicopters. You know, they've received a bid for about 340 helicopters, and normally when they get that many military helicopters, well, other countries will buy about the same number. So we're looking possibly at a 10-year run out of that one helicopter. And already the facility that they have out there has a 2-year backlog of the helicopters they're making now here at the Golden Triangle. So we see some good things ahead. We're having real difficulty stopping the leakage of our passengers from going to Jackson and Birmingham and Memphis to catch flights because of the prices that Delta Airlines is charging us. They are almost holding us hostage, holding our passengers hostage with the prices that they're charging. Yet, with the high prices and with the number of flights that have been cut, we're filling up most of the flights. But we're doing everything we can to bring additional carriers in here. This takes time. We're trying to build through relationships. We're trying to bring our delegation in on this to assist us and do everything we can to provide the good, convenient service, safe service that our people need here in the Golden Triangle at a reasonable price.
Question from any of the board members. I might add, last summer, when they came to me, they brought a whole delegation to see me. They wanted the city to fork out, what was $100,000 and something, and I believe the first question I asked is, well, how many people does this impact upon us from Octavia County? And I believe at the time it was only about 10 folks, and he just mentioned that we're up to where we have 29 people that are employed at Eurocopter, and this price has come down from $100,000 down to $6,500. So we indeed are potentially have a bargain here.
Mr. Mayor and Board, I would move that the city contribute $6,500 as its local match or its share of the local match for the CDBG grant to be used for water sewer upgrades extension at the Golden Triangle Airport.
I'll second.
We have a motion with a second.
Just as clarification, is it 6,500 or 13,000?
It's 6,500. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about 13,500, but the Airport Authority Board is going to pay half of everyone's share.
Gotcha, sorry.
We have a motion.
Just a clarification.
Second. Yes.
Consider making it part of your motion that I'd like to fund this out of the 2% money that the city receives for economic development. This actually would come from the previous 2% money that was designated for economic development and property improvements, and we do have funds in that account to fund this matching grant.
I have no objection to that. Would add that as part of a motion that this $6,500 be funded from the city's existing revenue accumulation of the 2% economic development.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Ms. Brule, are you ready for your presentation? Are you doing us a PowerPoint tonight?
No. But I can work something up for next time if you like. This is the result of having a meeting with Alderwoman Self and Ms. Outlaw and John Young, trying to come to some course of action or best way to proceed on the Oddfellow Cemetery located on Martin Luther King Drive. There are multiple issues to be dealt with, and I will try to answer the questions that were raised a little bit earlier. As we discussed it, the first step we were attempting to take, and that should be in process because I believe Mr. Young has visited with the Cobb Institute, is to proceed with some more of the gradiometer survey of the cemetery to provide us a little more information about some areas that were not surveyed earlier in the process. If you can, in your packet, you should have my report as well as some proposed rules and regulations of operation. Step one is the reference to the Cobb Institute. The board authorized utilization up to $5,000. We have thus spent $976.36 of that authorization. So we have continued to employ them to come back out. It's just a matter of getting the proper time frame, and we're setting up for that. There are some areas that appear to be vacant, and we need to make sure that they are to the best of our ability. The second step is to request that we suspend the sale of new plots. Now, this is should not impact people who already have family there. We'll try to accommodate that, and it should not impact those who have already made the purchases, that they can provide us that validation that they have the the deeds from previous sales, but temporarily allow us to suspend sale of new plots so that we can analyze the cemetery and see where there are available areas through this use of the gradiometer survey. And step 3 was to compile a basic laundry list, if you will, of what we would conceive to be beneficial for the future use of the cemetery. By that I mean, we were talking about an access road, we have talked about tiering, we talked about repairing sunken graves, creating a fence, creating an entrance, any number of things that would provide beautification and some upgrade to the cemetery. But the concern is that we'll have some historical integrity that might be impaired by that, and we need to provide a list to the folks who would have that information they can give us feedback on as to if we propose to do this, is this going to impair the historical integrity? If it does, we bring back to the board, if it does, how much is the value of the historical integrity versus the ability to make it a functional cemetery for the future? So that's an analysis that's going to have to come about, but we first need to find out exactly, of the things that we propose, what would impair the historical integrity. Also, the next step was to develop, or at least to consider, a set of policies and procedures for those who will be using the cemetery in the future. For example, requirement of a permanent headstone, those kinds of things. The cemetery on University has some policies and procedures that they have pretty much in place. When I first came on with the city, I proposed some additions to them. The mayor and I spoke, and Ms. MacArthur had proposed some policies and procedures. They use them, but I don't think they're formalized, and this would be an attempt to formalize so everyone would understand, what was required of them, or what the best course of action for any of this, such as interment, such as cremation, those sorts of things would be addressed. And Mr. Young has indicated that he is available to assist in plotting some of the areas of the cemetery that currently don't show any use, again, depending on what the gradiometer tells us over the coming months. And then we are in the process of filling in the graves now. There's some that have been exposed just due to age. Once we got it well mowed, which we did recently through the board's authorization, and it looks really good, there were some obvious graves that were open, and so we've begun to fill those in. And then, of course, once we get in springtime, when we can plant grass and do the things that would create a more uniform grass or area of shrubbery or whatever would be appropriate, then we'll do that at that time frame. But I wanted to provide that to the board. I'm sure Alderwoman Self will give you information as well. She was in on that meeting, and if there's some things that we need to do differently, or just trying to get some guidance on how best to proceed.
I interrupt. Mr. Ashford asked some questions earlier, and I don't know if you...
Well, he asked about the historical integrity, and that's
Right.
what I was trying to address, in that we don't know until we give them an idea of what it is we'd like to do, as to whether or not that has any implications. I know that I received an email that indicated that tiering, for example, of the cemetery would have a problem with the historical integrity, but it would tend to be a community or a board decision as to whether or not the historical integrity outweighs the ability or for future use. For example, if we put a road through there for access so that people can use the cemetery, what does that do to historical integrity? It's a balance. Is that worth the doing of it? And I think that's one of those things that is just going to have to be discussed and determined by the board with community input.
And at this point, as you said, we don't know historically what we will be permitted to do.
Correct.
So we're
We
waiting.
wanna submit a list to the Historical Society. We develop a list, submit it, and let them tell us whether or not this would impair the historical integrity, and if so, is that of enough value to us to make it worth doing, or do we want to retain that historical integrity to the point that we would not want to do either a road or a gate or tiering or whatever it is that would allow us to get greater utilization of it and beautification of it as well.
So, if I may, directly to Mr. Ashford, in your question about the road, that is, we are waiting on an answer. We want to do a road, but we don't know historically if they will let us do a road into the cemetery. So some of the things, we know that we can do, like filling in the graves, which we have already, started a process of doing that, and cutting. You know, we've done that, and they've done a very good job of it, because I've walked every inch of that cemetery, and that job was very well done. And if any of you've been in there and looked at it, you should be pleased with how well the grass has been cut.
We don't have any questions about that. And the other question was that what procedure you go through to bury that, you already have a plot there, what procedure you go through?
Yes. Well, we're not proposing any difference. If you already have the plot there, then we're not proposing the suspension of the use of the cemetery for those who already have plots. It's the concern of someone new coming in who wanted to bury someone, but they don't have a plot, and we haven't determined that there's a vacant space. We haven't plotted the cemetery in its entirety. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have to get permission to bury on your own lot?
No, ma'am. If you've got proof that you own the lot, then the funeral, that's all we're requiring the funeral director or the funeral home to have is proof that you already own the lot, and then you may proceed because you have the ownership. It's just a matter of proving ownership.
Some
I have a question. Has historical status been established at the cemetery?
Well, it's a historical site, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we know that it's,
Yeah.
because the marker is there. We know that it is on the register, historic register.
It becomes a question of whether you want to maintain historical status.
Right.
Or do you want to make it functional?
That's right. That's the question that Ms. Brewer was saying, that once we see what our limitations are, then we will come back and put that before the board, and then let you have some say into whether you want us to keep it historical, and we can't put a road in it, we can't put a fence around it, we can't put a gated, if we can't do any of those things, then do you want it to stay as it is, or do you want to say, let's make it user-friendly? Let's make it into something that we are proud of and forget about the historic. So that is a question that we don't have to answer tonight, but let's see where we are limited before we go there.
Oh, absolutely, yes, sir, certainly.
Any further discussion?
Well, I'm wanting guidance, so I'm asking that we suspend the sale of the plots, and if you don't want to do it tonight, and consider it, but that's, there are some steps here that I want to make sure that the board is comfortable that we proceed with, so.
Ms. Self, do you have any specific recommendations how we should proceed in light of what Ms. Brewer is saying?
Well, I was in that meeting when we proposed that recommendation that we suspend the sale of plots at this time, because, and I think I do need to share this, there was a plot sold here the other week that we thought was vacant, and when they started to dig, it was not, and that's why there was a casket under there. So until we can get this thing mapped out and know and have them to go back and probe again, so we will know what's vacant, we would rather not sell any new plots. Now, like she said, where we know that families have plots and family members are buried, we don't have any problem with that. But for somebody to come in for a new plot at this time, we would just like to suspend the sales until we can get them back in there and we know what we have that's available that we can sell. That's not already a family plot. Am I explaining that?
Very well.
So, yes, I do recommend at this time that we do not sell any new plot.
Would you like to make a motion that we follow the procedures that have been outlined with us in this direction?
I would, Mr. Mayor, I move that we follow the proposals that were submitted to us from Ms. Spruill and the committee.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. We've had a good discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Thank you, Ms. Spruill. Brings us down to the acknowledgement by the board of the attendance of Deborah Wood at the Municipal Court Clerk Statewide Seminar conducted by the Mississippi Judicial College. That's just acknowledgement, that's all that is, isn't it?
Yeah, let's just do it. I would move we acknowledge the attendance of Court Clerk Deborah Wood at the Municipal Court Clerk Statewide Seminar conducted by the Mississippi Judicial College on whatever date it was that she attended.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we advertise for letters of interest for the Parks and Recreation Commission for the expired term of Scott Maynard.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to advertise for expired term of Scott Maynard. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Brings us down to item F, discussion of available options for the provision of a police building and courts facility. That's the reason we had such a big crowd here tonight. We all know that our bonded indebtedness proposal failed. I feel like that we've all kind of recovered from what happened in regard to the vote on this, and perhaps that if we would have a work session, might be in order for us to discuss both the police building and courts facilities. And if someone would make a motion that we have a work session.
Do you have a suggested date?
Let's just set us a date.
Let's set us a date up. You're out the rest of this week.
Correct.
And what about next week, beginning of next week sometime?
Okay.
Are you,
next week.
how about, you're what, next week?
I'm out next week.
You're out all next week? Roy, where are you?
It's hard to say. We'll go ahead and schedule it. Why do we need a work session? Can we just have a discussion official board meeting? Why is it a work session?
Well, I mean, it would be a session that we could look at options. It could be quite lengthy. It would take a lot of the time of the board to, say, discuss this, and maybe we could come up with some ideas and thoughts to explore. It would give us an opportunity to explore multitude directions with it. I feel like that we need to say work and say discuss the issues here, and maybe come out of that work session with some solidarity in regard to the direction we would like to go.
I think the work session scheduling is a good first step, because we still have the same needs we had before the election, and they're not going away. So we need to go ahead and schedule. But I think it's very important that everybody on the board be available.
I think that's important as well.
Or at least afford the opportunity for everybody to be there. With
Obviously don't
conflicts,
schedule it when
yeah.
somebody knows they're gonna be out of town, is what I'm saying.
Next week. He's out.
When are
Next
you
week.
out? Just the entirety, or are you gonna be back the following?
What about the next Monday or
Be back to
Tuesday?
the
after?
30th. I mean, I could meet, obviously, the weekend, but the first weekday would be October the 30th.
Work session for police facility, maybe around October the 30th.
Trick or treat.
That might be a good time to have it. Would everybody look at the calendar to see if October the 30th would work in? We could have it early.
What day of the week? Seriously,
What day
October
is that?
30th is a Monday.
Monday.
I'll be fine.
What time is
that?
there?
Say 5:30.
I may I'll be in trial on the 30th and 31st. But, I may be out, I'm not for sure. judge will determine what time it's over, but I'll be in trial at Monday.
Good. Are you gonna be in town? You gonna be out of town then?
I'll be in trial in town.
In town. Maybe they'll get tired before 5.
It's Judge Howard's courtroom, I don't know.
Maybe it's back or something. I would suggest we look at, would a little later in the evening be better for you?
You can go ahead and schedule.
Say at 5:30, and if you can get there sometime during that evening, would that possibly work?
That's potential. I can't make no commitments, but I'll be in court, so just schedule whenever they can get it.
Can everybody put it on the agenda, October the 30th, approximately 5:30 in the afternoon? We'll look to see if we have anything is scheduled for this room, or we will go to the building department. So Monday's not going on. All right, so we'll need to go to the building department. We'll get the building department ready for us, so on October the 30th.
No. And just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, this would be a public meeting?
Yes. Right. If everybody showed up, it had to be public. You can't deny anybody that the presence is coming in. We'll set October the 30th, 5:30, to discuss our options in direction of police as well as municipal court. That brings us down to consideration adoption of the city policy on the creation. We're going to put that on hold. All right. You want a break? Yeah. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break at this point. We'll come back and we'll take with the technology committee report. What time is it?
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
Richard, I believe that's you, isn't it?
Yes, sir. The Technology Committee had a meeting on October 12th, which is our regular monthly meeting, and we had two items to bring before you today. The first was just a real brief update on the website. It's now in its final testing state, and the members of the committee are going to be reviewing it, making sure that we don't have any problems with the layout and structure of it and how it functions. And upon reviewing the website, it will be ready for public viewing, and that we anticipate that to be in less than a month.
Any questions? Okay.
The second one was one that had been brought before us, and it has to do with the idea of registering a 311 number for the area. For those people that don't understand what that is, back in 1997, the FCC and nation's telephone companies adopted other three-digit numbers for non-emergency calls, similar to what we have 911 for, which is, of course, for emergencies. And some cities have started adopting 311 numbers as a means to contact their city, whether if they have a non-emergency like a pothole or problems with their street, and they just need to contact City Hall for whatever reason. It provides a very easy-to-remember number that can be used to connect the caller directly to City Hall. The cost to it would be a one-time, non-recurring fee of exactly $1,073. We had Al Quinn look into it, and registering this number would cover the entire city of Starkville. And if we were to approve it, we could, the funds would be available through a line item, which I have and can provide. Before I start with the motion, does anyone have any questions?
So Richard, basically, if someone didn't know the number for an appropriate area at City Hall, they would just dial 311 from wherever they are in the city, and it would ring right here at City Hall.
Correct. So, and it's easy to remember, and you know, it would be essentially a non-emergency number for citizens in the area to use.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right, then. I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the expenditures of $1,073 to Bell South for the establishment of a 311 number for the area, and that it come from line item 001-045-605, labeled Communications, Other Administrative, and that the board authorize, Al Quinn to proceed with the establishment of the number.
We have a second to Richard's motion.
Second.
We have a motion to second. All in favor, say aye.
That's the question.
There was a question.
Question, excuse me, I did not see the question.
Can I ask a question? How does that affect cell phones? You're calling from a cell phone?
If their phone is registered in the city of Starkville, I believe it will dial through to, because just like 911, if you are calling from within the city limits, or it's in one of the towers in the city of Starkville, it will, similar to that.
Any other questions? We have a motion.
Just a second. Chief Lindley, any implications you see of this with our 911 or emergency numbers or anything of this sort?
That's just worked well enough.
So without problems on that?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Brings us down to the report from the Infrastructure Committee.
Mr. Mayor, before getting into that, for clarification on the acknowledgement of Deborah Woods, Tammy, on the acknowledgement of Deborah Woods' court clerk attendance, and I finally found the certificate to fill in the dates. It's September 7th through 8th, 2006.
Mr. Mayor, did you, it looks like you skipped item I before we get to
Oh, excuse
item J.
me, we did. I was looking at the other thing right there. Mr. Honeycutt, I believe that we're going to wait on your report, where you've been very much involved with the ADA recommendations in the building department and the permitting procedures.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. I believe some time ago, the ADA Commission come before you and gave a presentation on and had several recommendations. Since then, I was able to attend an ADA Commission meeting and go over some of these recommendations and make changes to our forms, and that's what you have here before you tonight, is 3 of the forms. We just added sign-off for the ADA Commission themselves. They've been reviewing plans It's still a work in progress, and their hard work's been really appreciated, and we're just taking it one step at a time.
Mr. Honeycomb, basically, these documents now allow for sign-offs where we currently have electric department and fire department. This would add an Americans with Disabilities Act signature line, and it certainly reflects the importance of ensuring compliance with that and ensuring that all the members of our community can access buildings and other areas of the community. But I wanted to ask, we have the chairperson of the Commission on Disability, Ms. Hilton, here. Has the Commission on Disability seen this, and are y'all comfortable with this first step here with the recommendations that they're making?
Yes, ma'am, I think we've added one to it, but it's more information.
It's a site plan review, the routing form, as well as when a person comes in to request a building permit, and those are the three things that were presented at the commission. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'd move approval of the adjustments to the building department policies and permit procedures to include the ADA signatories included on those forms as recommended by the building department.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We're now down to the report from the Infrastructure Committee.
Mr. Mayor and Board, the Infrastructure Committee met Friday last in a continuing look at the situation with regard to the furnishing of fire protection along the Highway 25 bypass for development there. We received additional information relative to the technical requirements, and we received additional information relative to possible rate changes to accommodate the funding of the expenditures that will have to be made. We will meet again very soon, and we'll have a recommendation for the full board at the first meeting in November.
Very good. That's about, 2 weeks off?
2 weeks or so off.
Very good. Thank you for your report. Building Codes and Planning Department, the first thing we have is consideration for a recommendation by planning and zoning for a zoning change from a PUD to an R1 located behind the lakes as requested by Davis, and Springer. Ken, were you present at the planning and zoning then? Is this something that you could possibly kind of talk through? I hate to put you on the spot, but,
Zoning change from a PUD to R1 behind the lake subdivision owned by Davis and Springer, which we previously stated. The board and commission recommended for approval this project, and to my knowledge, there were no outstanding problems, concerns, or questions. I believe they were signed off on by all department heads.
have all of you had an opportunity to look at this?
Based on the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'd move approval of this zoning change from a PUD to R1 based on the change in the neighborhood and a need for single-family dwellings.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Jim, second.
Okay. Any discussion? I think they've already discussed it for us. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Passes. If you take the second item, there's an amendment to the PUD.
The next item is amendment to existing PUD in Phase 5 of the Lake subdivision. What this is where they taking what was gonna be a right-of-way to continue on the existing subdivision. They've closed it off for the previous subdivision that you just approved, and is gonna turn that space into 2 more lots.
I'd move approval of the zoning change to close a proposed street in the cul-de-sac and create 2 building lots for single-family homes, which was an amendment to the PUD in Phase 5 of the Lake subdivision.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Brings it down to the third item.
It's a special use exception in a C2 zone located on Old West Point Road, also formerly known as Glen Street. The request is made by Mr. Jim Defoe of CKK Construction, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval on this.
All of you familiar with this? This was the old electric transmission spot on Glen Street, which all that was removed and that lot became available and was bought, and it's got a nice proposal for that spot.
Mayor, there's one additional thing. The board passed that with a special condition that it be passed to allow that there be access across the property to allow access to the cemetery there. And that was a special condition we put on it.
Was that accepted? Yeah, requiring this, is that right?
That was what the planning and zoning put as a special condition, and in the meeting, it was told to the planning and zoning commission that the developer himself had agreed to allow access to the property. I think Mr. Brent was representing the developer. So it wasn't a problem for anybody, but I just want to make the board aware of the special condition that was.
Otherwise, they would not have any access to that old cemetery, is that right?
That's correct. They had some pedestrian access. What this is gonna do is allow some perpetual vehicular access for the 3 or 4 times a year they need to get in there and clean up the cemetery.
All of you have had the opportunity to hear proposal with condition. Do we have a motion?
Move approval of the special use exception in the C2 zone as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission, with the additional stipulation that this special use exception is contingent on the owner providing vehicular access to First Presbyterian Church to this property, as well as that the covenant bylaws would reflect this cemetery access.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The next item, consideration of a request for a change in zoning from C2 to R4 located on the old Borden Foods property by Tag Investments as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission.
This property is going to be located on the south end of the site, which abuts a single-family neighborhood, so they were asking for the rezoning from C2 to R4 to keep in with the neighborhood, to allow them to build residential dwellings on these spaces to join the existing residential neighborhood, so it wouldn't be abutting the C2 property. And staff recommended approval of this. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this change.
I'd move approval of the rezoning request from a C2 zone to an R4 zone based on a change in the neighborhood and a need for more single-family housing at this proposed site.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say yea.
Yay.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. The next item is consideration of final plat approval for the Pearson Place commercial subdivision located on Hospital Road.
If any of you are familiar with this is just a duplicate stamp of Phase 1. If any of you recall that, Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of final plat for Pearson Place commercial subdivision Phase 2. All subdivision requirements have been met.
And also, Mayor and Board, you should know that it was told to the Planning and Zoning Commission that the appropriate bonding and securities have been put in place to ensure that the road will be paved
To
to
specifications.
specifications.
That's always encouraging since we've got some that haven't been. Do we have a
We've been-
motion?
There's been a policy implemented at Planning and Zoning Commission level that there won't be any approvals without sufficient minutes reflecting that that has been done.
Do we need to,
Contract was actually on site yesterday morning to start the paving, but the 5 inches of rain kind of had something to say about that.
It always will, Mark.
Mr. Favor, would it be appropriate then in our minutes that we reflect that the road paving requirement?
Absolutely.
And based on the last couple of meetings, we've been very specific about this plan review report, that we make sure that things are based on, subject to approval of all the varying departments, and I believe there's only one on here that would be from Mr. Devlin.
If you look on there, Matt, on the bottom, it was told to the Planning and Zoning Commission that Mr. Devlin had agreed to it. And if you see down there, it says okay, for that 10306, he signed off on it on 10306. That's what, he's here, but I mean, that was what was told to Planning and Zoning Commission.
When it talks about sewer can't be inspected, and so the sewer's now been installed, is that?
It's been installed in the station.
Correct, okay.
So do we have a motion?
Move approval of final plat approval for the Pearson Place commercial subdivision. All subdivision requirements have been met, and make a note for the record that the road will be paved by the developer prior to it being approved by the city.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The next item.
Request for preliminary and final plat approval for Chestnut Crossing Commercial Subdivision located in the old Kroger Shopping Center on Louisville Street. This is across Louisville Street from the school, if any of y'all are familiar with it.
Is this Mr. Robert Rogers?
Yes, it's RMR Investments, I believe.
Mr.
Yes.
Grant is here, he was
Any
representing
questions?
the developer of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mr. Faber, why are we doing preliminary and final plat approval at the same time?
That was going to be my question.
All
I don't understand that.
infrastructure is in place. It's an existing facility. It's already been separated for rental units. Mr. Brent can answer the question.
I understand, the question still remains why we're doing preliminary plat and final plat approval requests at the same time.
It was our understanding that that's what we were required to do. There have not been any physical changes to the building other than we've taken this shopping center and done similar to what we've done a couple other places in town and done what's called a condo plat. And it just separates the building into 3 different areas.
I have no objection at all to the project. I'm puzzled as to procedure because we have a preliminary plat procedure to be followed by then a final plat.
Can I add something to that?
Certainly.
This is an unusual procedure in that preliminary plat by definition is when the property owner comes up and gets the scope of his project approved, then he goes back, he goes through planning commission and board with, and you okay his idea. Then he goes, gets his working drawings for all his infrastructure improvements together, comes to the staff, and gets those approved, installs them. Once they're installed and approved by the staff, then they bring the final plat up here. All the final plat is identical to the preliminary plat with all the roads, water, sewer, and everything in place. This instance, and a couple of instances, it's similar to this in the past, since all the infrastructure is there, the building is there, the firewalls are there, we saw no reason to have a preliminary and a final, since there wasn't going to be anything done in between as far as.
I understand the logic. Does the ordinance allow a deviation from the normal process where a preliminary plat comes first, even if it's already there, and then a final plat comes?
I don't remember anything in the ordinance prohibiting it, but we didn't specifically look at that. It wasn't presented as a preliminary. I thought it was presented as a final plat approval at the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So because
could
the
be
the
incorrect.
thing here is preliminary and final.
I thought it was presented as final plat, so I'm not sure.
The minutes reflect that they're requesting preliminary and final from the planning and zoning commission.
Planning commission meeting, it actually says request a preliminary/final plat approval for Chestnut Crossing Commercial Subdivision.
And that's what the minutes reflect, that it was of the planning and zoning commission. That
This
it
is
was
the
both.
planning and zoning commission.
Right.
Answer to your question, I don't know that the ordinance strictly prohibits it, but
Or allows it necessarily.
I think as procedurally, we should be consistent. And I brought this up at the meeting also with Mr. Brown, that the planning and zoning commission's implemented a procedure to be consistent. And so, to be consistent, I think we need to have the preliminary approved and then do the final plat approved.
So are you suggesting this go back to planning and zoning for them to do a preliminary and then come back with a final plat?
He's suggesting that we do it in two motions.
Yeah, okay, two motions here, all right. Do we have a motion that we approve the preliminary plat for the Louisville Street, the Chestnut Crossing Commercial Subdivision?
I would move that preliminary plat approval be given to the Chestnut Crossing Commercial Subdivision located on Louisville Street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Now, do we have a notion that we approve the final plat for Chestnut Crossing on commercial subdivision?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
move that the final plat for Chestnut Crossing Commercial Subdivision on Louisville Street be granted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Brings us down for consideration of site plan approval for M&L Climate Control located on Maury Lane as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is this the all climate?
Yes, this is a climate control storage
yeah.
facility in Upper Crossing, just behind the new radiology clinic.
There were two notes on this site, this plan review report, from the fire department about the location of the fire hydrants. Has that issue been resolved?
That issue has been resolved, and I have the recently signed off version of that. It wasn't received until after the packets were made, if needed for clarification.
So Chief Grantham, that
Move approval of the site plan for M&W Climate Control located on Mallory Lane as all requirements have been met.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Thank you. Office of the City Clerk.
Good evening.
Ms. Outlaw, who's been preparing this claims docket since we have a vacancy in your office?
It's been a joint effort.
And who's the joint efforts? Who are the people who've been doing it?
All the ladies in the office.
Everybody that's there been putting it together? Like,
Well, yes, Alice has been actually Alice and Emma has been actually keying, and Debbie and myself have been putting the invoices together.
I just wanted to know that.
Okay. And I do want to bring to your attention the additions. I had an additions to the claims docket. And one of them is going to be the Oktibbeha County Economic Development. And it will need your approval on this particular one. They're asking for $28,312.50, which is a portion of the sale of the Cornerstone property. They sold a lot out there, and because we are paying the loan, a portion of the loan, they're saying that because they sold that guarantee needs to be paid to TVA, which comes to our portion of $28,312. And that is a part of the claims docket. The additions. And then we do have the claims docket through October 12th.
that I recommend that you approve.
Move approval of the claims docket through September 30th, 2006, as well as through October 12th, 2006.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of paying the claims docket, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, ma'am. Electric Department,
Mayor and Board, the Office of the City Clerk has advertised a request for proposals from architectural firms statewide, and we received 3 proposals from local architects. Toward the last part of the advertisement period, we had 2 or 3 architectural firms from around Jackson and around on the coast that called expressing an interest in sending a proposal, but they also said that they had actually didn't see the request for proposal until late in the process, so they felt like that they would not be able to submit a proposal within the time frame. What I'm asking is that we be allowed to re-advertise to grant these firms the opportunity to send in a proposal, and also keep the 3 proposals that we have to be reviewed by a committee, hopefully of board members at a later time.
What was their reason for wanting to re-advertise? Didn't they read the advertisement?
They saw the advertisement, but they saw it late for them to respond, and this is just advertising to be able to give them the opportunity to respond and send in a proposal.
I hate to say it, but I feel like if we re-advertised for bids, we've already put it out just because a few companies wanted to get in at the last minute, they might set a bad precedent for the future bids we might play.
Mr. Hathaway, just to follow up on that, it seems to me that it would be unfair to those who already submitted bids to reopen it. And, of course, these other firms should have gotten their bids in within that time frame. That's why we have a certain time in which they can advertise. So I'm not in favor of opening the process of just to accommodate one or more who want to get their bids in. It's incumbent upon them to go through whatever process or criteria that they should have utilized to ensure that they got their bid in with their within that time frame. Seems like, if you're in a particular business, you should know have a method or criteria about checking bids, but I think it'd be unfair to those who met the deadline, and then to open it up to just allow these people who did not get it in on before the deadline. So I think it will be like the gentleman from Ward 4 say, that it will be a bad precedent if we do that. So we got to follow our own rules. We set the time frame, and basically the only reason we want the requesters to reopen it is just to give them an opportunity. And they had an opportunity. Right. So we should not give them any special exception, any special privilege. So, when you agree with me that we open it up, we give preferential treatment to those who did not get in on before the deadline.
That's right.
So we got the 3 proposals already in, so that's the bottom line. I'm not speaking against these firms, but I'm looking at the process. So we got to be fair and impartial to these people.
It was just trying to accommodate everyone that wanted to try to put in a proposal, and even though that they were late in their response. But I do understand.
Same opportunity the other 3 did.
I would agree to, we have advertised.
Just for my edification, Ed, what is the advertising? Do we advertise in the Starkville Daily News? Do we send out requests for proposals?
We advertise in Starkville Daily News, and I think we ran it on the internet, on the statewide,
our website?
website.
Oh, yeah, we can't grant this special exception, and this is just me talking, I'm just one board member, I'm not in favor of that.
Mayor and Board, I'm going to make a motion that we deny the request to authorize for the re-advertisement for proposals for the architectural services for the new Starkville Electric Department customer service building.
I second.
Have a motion and a second that we deny the request to re-advertise for architectural proposals. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Brings us down to consideration of appointment of committee to analyze and present a recommendation to the board. Did we not refer that to the infrastructure committee at one time, or?
I don't
Did we do
recall.
that? Probably, but we did not.
No, I don't know.
That didn't come to us.
I thought we referred it, but
We certainly haven't done that.
So speak up, Everett.
Well, I would request that a committee be formed to act as advisory on the selection of architectural firm for the design and construction of the electric department new office building.
Are you wanting the committee to review the bids you receive and the plans they
And
provide?
then make a recommendation back to the full board.
That's right.
And can you include in that that committee also review the contract, because there was some question about the last contract, that either I reviewed the contract, because we had the problem with the last contract, architectural contract.
Would you like to be on the committee?
I'll be fine.
Mr. Davis, what did you say here?
Oh, I was just following up on something Richard said. He said, review the proposal, and then I said, then come back with a recommendation to the full board, picking one of them.
after review by the city
Right,
attorney, the
right.
contract, yeah,
Right.
he doesn't need to be on the committee, so.
Just review the contract. So you're making that in form of motion, Rich?
I don't have any problems. I just wanted some clarification too on how big a committee do you want? Just something that, I don't want to make just an ambiguous motion of a committee. I'd like to at least have a number of people or something.
3, 4.
Mr. Mayor, I move that this matter be sent to the infrastructure committee.
What are they gonna do with it?
Look at it, make a report and recommendation.
On
Just
the
like it-
architectural firm, actually do, the service of a committee that he's asking for?
Well, he asked for appointment of a committee, he didn't ask for any criteria, he said for a committee.
Well, I'm just asking though, but you're suggesting that maybe the infrastructure committee could be the committee to help, select the architect?
Yes, sir.
Okay, would anybody else have a problem with that?
To recommend to the board.
Right.
I don't mind, but Ed, if you had some other people in mind as well, would the infrastructure committee have any objections to those people participating in just this one process?
I don't have,
What did he say?
Was anybody else that he thought ought to be, on that committee?
Which I think that, I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think they'd welcome any input from their colleagues in this process.
Would certainly,
What,
welcome review of the
procedure
proposals
y'all
by
used on the
anybody.
warehouse? Did you have a committee
Basically-
on the warehouse?
no.
How did you proceed without the committee?
I just contacted Pryor and Morrow and brought their contract before the board for approval, and we went with it from there.
We're utilizing a different process this time, where we actually requested from, rather than just go contract professional services with one people. So now we need to review these proposals.
We advertised for proposals this time, we did not the last, as I understand.
That's correct.
Mr. Highway, I think it's thoughtful that you want to include some additional people to help in the process of reviewing this, because this is going to be something that we're going to be stuck with for a long time, and we want it to be right from the beginning. So if we're going to go ahead and move this to infrastructure committee, I encourage you to, of course, be there as a part of that, and if you have anyone else in mind, you would like to provide an opinion on this, to invite them to come along.
I don't have anybody else that I would want on it, unless the board had someone. But the infrastructure committee would be, it would be appropriate, I think, to try to make this decision.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second to the motion on the floor? And that is for this to go before the infrastructure committee.
Mayor, I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
see.
Yeah, you're supposed to be coming back with John Young, some other folks on there.
Mayor and Board, I would like to be able to send David Hatfield and Jason Horner to Decatur, Alabama on November the 9th to a traffic light school. Hopefully, by this school, they can actually be able to troubleshoot a lot of these lights that we have, and we're getting more and more as the city grows. And I would request that they be allowed to attend this school.
Mr. Hathaway, could I suggest that we, in terms of attendance at these professional training and educational meetings, that we go on and include Shane Grantham to the TVPPA supervisors class, all in the same motion?
Yes, sir.
And I would move that David Hatfield, Jason Horner be authorized to attend traffic signal school in Decatur, Alabama from November 7 through November 9, and that Shane Grantham be authorized to attend the TVPPA supervisors class in Nashville, Tennessee, October 19th through October 20th, and that as necessary, they be advanced appropriate amounts for out-of-state travel.
Excellent. Do we have a second? We have that motion with a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Thank you. Engineering and Streets, report on the renovation construction plan of the fiscal year ADA sidewalk compliance plan.
Yes, sir. Last, we discussed whether we should bid this off, or the city street department forces could perform this work. Talked with the street superintendent, and we agreed that he feels like that it was something that the street department could do, and do it a good bit cheaper than we could bid it off. And the question has come up about what project will be shoved aside for them to be able to do that. And the reason that we feel like we can do it without actually sacrificing anything is because we have some source of supply contracts out for labor to do certain pieces of work. It doesn't happen to be that particular sidewalk kind of work that we can do under source supply, but we can shift some jobs around where the crew that would be doing the concrete work for the ADA compliance program would do that, and then another crew that we would contract with under an existing contract could do some of the work that they would be normally doing. Did you understand any of that?
So when can we get started?
We can get started probably next week, give or take the weather. We are going to have to build or do this work in phases, and I don't mean necessarily one end or the other, but if you'll recall, the church has, not the church, the bank has, well, one of the churches, the Presbyterian Church has two driveways that we're going to be going. We can only do one at a time. The bank has two, so we're going to have to kind of phase that work in to when we can work with the bank. The portion of it in front of Days Engineering, we're going to have to do that in two sections to allow them access to their building at all times. So it's going to be, we're going to have to kind of skip up and down the street to be able to do it and phase it so that we don't disrupt anybody. But they're going to start next week, start some tearing out work.
And when would you expect reasonably that it should be completed?
I would think in maybe a month and a half, depending on how fast we can get concrete. We're having a lot of trouble getting concrete. They want to send it in boatloads, basically, rather than small amounts. So we have to pretty well schedule it ahead of time and get up enough for a truckload. So I think we can go relatively fast with it. We could probably get some of it done before we could even contract it out.
Right.
If that means anything.
I certainly appreciate the recommendation to have it be done in-house, and I don't know if there's any action that the board needs to take to authorize for that to happen. I would
I'm
like.
just going to report back to you that was my findings.
I think if knowing that we're expecting to start next week and that it may take upwards to a month and a half, the only thing I'd ask is if we encounter any delays that you just advise us of that.
The one delay there's built-in delay is the east side of the Presbyterian Church. That's their access for that new construction they're doing. We don't want to put that concrete in there till they get all their heavy work done. So that might be the last thing, and I can't tell you when that would be done, but the rest of it should be done within a month and a half or so.
And I guess the next thing would be for Marquita. We, of course, reserved money in our infrastructure budget for these sidewalks improvements, and just want to make sure that we account for all these costs specifically so that we know and keep an accurate tally, because I could see some of these things going towards the streets budget, and that's not what they were intended for, specifically for sidewalk improvements for ADA compliance. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Fire Department. You're gonna do the PowerPoint.
I am.
Excellent. Go to sleep.
Just kind of touch base with what's going on. I made a presentation to you won't go to sleep during this, to the planning and zoning just out of professional courtesy, but I wanted to try to educate y'all to see where the development is going and give you our recommendations. And kind of what the history of it is, city regulations right now, the city of Starkville currently operates under height restrictions for new construction. And we're under the 2003 International Code, NFPA standards, and the 2002 National Code. And we're working with Ken in the building department. We're reviewing the 2006 building codes, and hopefully before long we'll be able to come to you with a recommendation. Some of this I'll be able to move real quick because I gave the same presentation to zoning and planning, and y'all are a little more up on the rating bureau, but the one I want to bring to attention is the 13% at the bottom, where planning, zoning, building department, and codes come involved, and that's 13% of our rating. The Rating Bureau has already designated us with 2 ladder districts. That's the reason why we are going to have to run 2 ladders right now. And how they do that is if any 5 buildings are in an area that are 3 stories or more, or there's a high density of roof areas such as Walmart, Lowe's, Gulf States, and that sort of thing, or if there's more than 1.5 miles or 2 miles in an area from a ladder truck, or a combination of the above. So that's already happened twice in our city, and the Rating Bureau has designated the 2 ladder districts, and I'll show you on the board here in a few minutes of the 2 ladder districts. And what I'm coming to y'all for is for guidance and for advice to tell us how do we go about doing this. If we keep developing like we are now, we're going to be running ladder trucks out of every fire station. And just to kind of review on building construction, a type 1, and this is where we get into water flows. Doug is working very well and very hard to get the water flows that we need recommended by the Rating Bureau. But a type 1 constructed fire resistant is such as the hospital or Crites Hall. Type 2 is non-combustible, such as Walmart, and that high-density roof area that we get into. In those areas, you cannot make deep internal or interior attacks. You have to go up and above to get down on top of it to get the fire put out. A type 3 you'll see down in Main Street in the old area of town, and also if you look up there in the top right, the 911 strip mall, those are type 3 constructions. And when you figure all that in, that's what we figure on fire flow and whether they've got sprinkled or not. Type 4, heavy timber, that's the old Burger King place, okay? Type 5 is your normal houses, such as in top right, it's in different subdivisions in town. It's just wood frame houses, what it is. Like Sherwood Forest, that one's where that one came from. And then there's other construction types that kind of a hodgepodge catch everything else. And then the occupancy use also figures on whether they sprinkle the building or fire flows and those sort of things. Now here's where we need to get into the meat of it. If we continue to build like we're building now, we're going to be designated with other ladder districts. And what I want to do and what my recommendation is, we're going to talk about that in just a second. You'll see even shots from in the downtown area, the high roof, the older buildings that's going to require ladder districts and those sort of things. The Rating Bureau also requires us 1.5 miles to 2 miles travel by road distance in these areas, not by the way the crow flies, but by the way you travel on streets. Outside of those distances is going to make us have more ladders and also more manpower. Present right now, we have our ladder. Our old ladder flows 1,500 gallons per minute. The new one flows 2,000 gallons per minute. And in a lot of the commercial areas, such as downtown area and the new developed area, the Rating Bureau asked us to have 3,000 gallons per minute for fire flow, just like in Lakeside. Ladder height, our current ladder is 65 feet. Our new one is 100 foot. So we can actually allow higher buildings in the ladder district around the downtown area. The further you get away, you reach at 100 foot by 33 feet from the base of the building. We can actually put that platform on the roof of a 9-story building. So that's the kind of height we're doing. So here's the kind of points of concern that we have. The current height of buildings being built because of Avalon Apartments on Highway 25 and Lakeside and Walmart, we're now having to we're required to run a ladder truck out of Station 2. And like I said before, if we continue to do that, we're going to have to buy more ladder trucks. Here's our recommendations. This is what we think that would work for us. Discontinue the current building height restrictions in the downtown area, such as the Ladder 1 district, and that's going to be the green area. If you look on the map, that's Station 1's ladder district. The blue is MSU campus. It also falls under that ladder district, so we're covered there. I guess the pink in the middle, it's the overlap of the two ladder districts. We want to continue the height restriction outside the two ladder districts. In other words, y'all can make up your mind if you want us to. We can allow up to 4 3-story buildings or up to 2 3-story buildings with a large strip mall and that sort of thing, and we can stay within our requirements of not requiring, or the Rating Bureau not requiring us a ladder district. So we want to keep the height restriction outside of those 2 ladder districts, and then allow the current building codes to dictate the construction material, whether they have to be sprinkled or not, and we can deal with that on life safety issues and life codes. We're recommending that we enforce the 2 current ladder districts, and you can see on the map, and allow anything above 3 stories to be built in those 2 ladder districts, but then take a hard look outside those ladder districts and not let them build the huge tall stories of the buildings. We don't want to restrict development, but we also want guidance from either the board or legal counsel. You know, what do we do if development starts taking off? You know, can we restrict them from building? If we don't restrict them, or are we just going to say we're going to buy another ladder truck when it happens? Because it will happen as we develop around the bypass. And then we want not only planning and zoning to be aware of the ladder district, but also, and basically what they told me last week was, you make the recommendation and tell us when they're outside the district, and then we'll talk about them. And that's pretty much it. Is there any questions? It's just basically an informational presentation to let you know if we continue on the path we're going now, we're going to buy more ladder trucks.
Let me ask you a question. You brought up Walmart. Do they have a sprinkler system?
Yes.
Do they have a group of guys that fight fire in the event that they have a fire in the store?
Walmart?
Yes.
Not that I know of.
Well, I mean, shouldn't we know that? I'm giving you an example of Gulf State. You mentioned Gulf State. They've got a sprinkler system. They've got their own fire people in the plant. Do we not require this from industries or Walmarts or these type of things?
OSHA gets into requiring fire brigades, but let me clarify what a fire brigade is. All that is for somebody that will attack a small incipient fire, which is with a fire extinguisher. That's it. If you can't put it out with a 5-pound fire extinguisher, they tell you to get out. They're not true firefight. I mean, they're trained to fight with a fire extinguisher, and that's it.
And Chief, Fire Station 2 be them in just in a
yes.
few seconds.
Anywhere in town, our average is 3.4 minutes in response time.
It'll be quicker than that, probably, Fire Station 2.
For Station 2, yes.
Yeah, Walmart.
What do we do next? What do you see as I know you're just talking about these as recommendations, and probably the best presentation I've seen from a city standpoint in my entire time here, and I appreciate all the work that you've done. What do we do next? What do you see as our next steps?
I don't know where legally we can stand, and that's the reason why I came to y'all. To me, it would be enforce the 2 ladder districts. And say anything that's over 3 stories, you can build anything you want to over 3 stories or high roof density in those 2 areas. But when you get outside those 2 areas, then I think we've got to take a hard look at what it's going to require us to do. In other words, if up 25 bypass, they start putting strip malls and 3-story apartments and motels, then eventually you're going to buy another $1 million ladder truck. Impact fees are a no-no, and don't even talk about it, but somewhere down the line, you know, I think if a guy's building a $60 million project, he wouldn't mind buying a $500,000 ladder truck. That's my thoughts.
My question is that with the ladder truck, the 65-footer that you're gonna take for renovations, that will leave that lime green up there without a ladder truck to fight that 3-story situation. Is that not correct?
Here?
Yes.
No, sir, this is our new platform ladder.
No. Lime green, that light.
Here?
Yeah.
Yes. In other words, right now, this has no ladder in it. And
That's right.
when we send it to Texas, we'll be without a ladder, but we're without one now. So as soon as we get it back, then we can start enforcing that ladder district.
Certainly seems that it ought to be something referred to the city attorney for research on what restrictions can or cannot be put under these types of conditions.
Before we get in a lawsuit.
And remember, this area down here really shouldn't concern us. This is all South Montgomery. This is residential.
I beg your pardon.
I'm talking about ladder trucks. I'm not talking about pumpers. We're okay here. You've got a truck within a half a mile of your house.
There's several structures that meet your requirements.
I've seen the fire down there, it just burns now.
But basically, we have the opportunity to get out ahead of this, whereas most of the times we're being presented with things and we got to come up with $1 million tomorrow. This is actually something we can do proactively, and I appreciate what you've done. And if the city attorney can review what we need to do to take this to the next step.
I have talked to the rating bureau in several other towns. A lot of cities have ladder districts, Columbus, Oxford, but the rating bureau designates ladder district. If we enforce it, we'd be the number one in the state that takes a proactive stance on this and not wait till we're required to buy a ladder truck or wait till we're required, mandated to do that. We would control our own destiny is what I see.
Basically, this could save us money in the long run.
Exactly.
Good question, good presentation. Thank
And
you,
it
sir.
could engender us an interesting lawsuit in this area.
Personnel.
Mayor and board, what I have is a recommendation that we adopt a policy regarding promotions primarily and temporary promotions. And I'm recommending this because there's been a lot of inconsistency in the way we've handled it in the past. In the staff meetings, the department chiefs, department managers said we need this because there's occasions when, particularly like in the fire department, when somebody has been in Iraq and another person has moved into that position without any pay, but with full responsibility. Now, in many cases in the past, when this has happened, the person that has moved up has gotten a 3% increase, and in other cases they have not. And at the same time, there's been an informal policy that when somebody's promoted, they get a 10% increase. So I just need to formalize this with a policy. That's what this is all about.
Board members with questions?
Well, a couple of questions, just to start one, take the C, temporary promotion, assigned to do another job on a temporary basis, 1 month or longer. Why would the person not just be raised to the minimum salary of that job?
Well, that's something to consider. One reason that I didn't suggest that is because if it's a temporary promotion, when the person is moved back, let's say it's a 10% increase or more, it's more difficult for the person to go back to his original salary. But if you give them the 3% increase, it's a little bit easier to do. That's the rationale for it.
Mr. Mayor, I have 5 reasons why I'm not going to support this proposed policy that I have written out so I can make sure I articulate them. First of all, this situation has not been regular enough to require such a policy. Secondly, the board should act on these instances on an as-needed basis and on the recommendation of the department head. Number 3, the current practice has sufficed in providing guidance for those occasions when additional compensation is warranted. Fourth, serving in the capacity of 1 month seems too short a time frame. It used to take about a month to hire personnel when a vacancy occurs. And fifth, we do not need to hinder progress with a policy that may be ineffective and cumbersome. And for those reasons, I'm going to vote against this policy if there's a motion to approve it.
Anyone else?
You know, it just seems on the demotion, as they like to say, if someone has been demoted, but not for a disciplinary reason, one could make the argument that the salary ought to stay the same. If the demotion or change in assignment was something for the convenience of the city.
Alderman Ron, this is another reason why this policy could be ineffective and cumbersome, because sometimes even in state government, people are demoted, may just be, the salary may be the same, it may not be a change in salary. So the current system has been workable over the years, and I just see this policy causing some potential problems.
Well, I bring it to you because most of the department managers agreed that we need this. We didn't have a policy, and that's been a problem. And to write this, I contacted Tupelo and Oxford and piggybacked on them a little bit. So this is pretty much what they have.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
Going to go away, and these
these National Guard members are going to return home anytime soon. So based on that, is this the best solution to that? Because that seems to be the biggest problem that we're trying to correct here is how do we address those situations?
Well, the Iraq situation is a part of the problem, for sure. But there's other situations as well, in workers' comp cases where somebody's out for extended periods of time. There's just any number of cases that come up. And it's pretty common to, when somebody is temporarily moved up, to give them some kind of pay increase. And my experience has been when you do that, and then when you bring them back down, it creates real problems because they've set up their budget based on their new pay, and it's hard to adjust afterwards. So that was the reason for the 3%. That's the only rationale for it. But I think it's been an informal practice here, from what I understand, to give a 3% increase. So, but not in all cases.
Can I speak? I'm probably one that spearheaded this, because of things that happened in my department in the past and other departments, but the main one is there are other cases other than military, and I can give you instance in my department, 3 different cases that's happened in the last 2 years. One of them was a workers' comp case that lingered on for 18 months. The next one was a court case that has been lingering on for almost 2 years. And then I have 3 military guys. One guy has been gone. He signed up for his 4th year, and he is a captain, second in command on a shift. So lieutenants have had to fill that responsibility. Plus, I have to pull overtime for another captain or battalion chief because in our policy, only a captain or battalion chief can control a shift. So I can't just let a lieutenant, just anybody on a company officer, jump in that little red truck and control. So I pull overtime when that particular captain needs to be off, or that particular battalion chief needs to be off that doesn't have a captain. So if I could temporarily reclassify that person to a captain, then I could avoid overtime and put him in that slot and let him control the shift. And so those are the reasons. I don't have a problem in coming with individual basis, but I mean, and if that's the case, next board meeting, I'll have 6 cases for you. Because in a particular rank structure, military-oriented rank structure, when you move one up, you've got another to move up. So you got a captain, a lieutenant, and a sergeant that have to do these duties. And what I've done in the past have gone by seniority. I didn't pick or choose. I took the senior person that was under that rank, and I put him in that position. You know, if a guy does somebody else's job for 4 years, I should have already done this. But I kept hearing, well, I'll be back in 10 months. I'll be back in 6 months, you know. And so every time you get to that point, then I realized he'd signed up for another year. So we've got 3 right now that I don't even know if they are coming back. So that was the whole reason behind that. And I've seen it in other departments. I've seen other departments, you know, whatever the reason, without department heads or whatever, you know, if they had to step up and do it, and they weren't getting compensated for doing that job. And that was my reason behind that.
Other questions from other aldermen?
It just sort of seems like the adjustments both up and down are skewed. Certainly if someone is promoted, one would assume they would not seek promotion unless this was something they really wanted to do, or that promotion brought them a higher salary level.
You talking about if they assume somebody else's duty?
It just says when an employee is promoted to a higher graded position.
Well, obviously, to benefit that person, I mean, I'm trying to get the guy some compensation.
I'm not arguing against compensation. If it's a higher graded position, then it should automatically carry a higher compensation. What is being proposed here is a skewed 10% adjustment to that pay scale for that one person.
If it's a promotion, it's 10%. If it's a temporary promotion,
I'm
it's
talking
just in 3%.
promotion number feet here. If someone is promoted, he ought to receive the higher salary.
And maybe promotion is not the term we need to use. Maybe we need to use temporary reclassification. And then that way we don't get into promotion, and then that way it's not a it falls into our do what? Yeah, that's what I do. I call them acting captain, acting lieutenant, and that gives them the authority they need.
Reclassification certainly connotates something different than what we're talking about here, to me. A temporary reclassification or interim position, as opposed to temporary promotion.
So if we had active or temporary reclassification or active assignment, whatever, are we comfortable with the provisions? Under item C, if we just call that temporary reclassification?
Would one ever be temporarily reclassified, now unless this is the convenience of the city, in a sense, would one ever be temporarily reclassified to a position where the pay scale is lower?
No. Because
then it seems like that person ought to get whatever that pay scale is established for that temporary reclassification position.
Prime example, if the firefighters are gone, and I'm using my personnel because I know them, but if a firefighter was in Iraq, and that's the reason why I asked you to hire temporary firefighters until they came back, and they know up front that when the others come back, they could very well lose their jobs. And so you would never temporarily reclassify down. If you ever go down, you're going to demote.
Well, and of course, we get back to the demotion. If it's for the convenience of the city, the person, in my opinion, ought to retain the same pay classification. If it's a disciplinary action or something, that's yet another story.
Yeah, I know it hadn't happened in our department. We've never, for convenience, demoted anybody.
The two primary issues that we had when I wrote this was the promotion and the temporary promotions. I just added transfer, thinking that this might happen as well, and demotion. I'm not aware of any demotions that have actually occurred here. In other places I've seen it, but I haven't seen it here. So, I would suggest that maybe we should just strike out demotion if that's an issue.
I said demotion is one with me if an employee is asked to do another job because you need someone at that time to do that job, and it is a less pay than what that person normally would get. If you as the supervisor is asking them to do that, then I do not think that they should be their salary should be reduced to whatever level that job is if they have not done anything to be, quote, demoted. That would be totally unfair. But we're playing, well, to me, we're playing with the word temporary or what was the other word we were using?
Well, promotion or demotion versus reclassification.
And reclassification or acting, because you're using the example, someone is in Iraq and you need someone to fill that position. To me, I already thought that if you move somebody into a captain's position because you needed somebody there, because that spot is vacant at this time and you must have one, that while they were in that position, that they were being paid that salary.
See, I as a department head, I can't change their salaries without your authorization.
So this is something then we should have been authorized a long time ago, because just as you wouldn't expect a person to do a job paying less, you ask them to do a job paying less than what they're making, and then you would cut their salary down, then you shouldn't ask a person at this level to do a job up here and you not give them that salary that goes with that job. I didn't know that we weren't doing that.
And anytime you go up to a higher level, you have additional responsibilities. You have more men you're supervising. And
so you ought to get the pay level established for that position. That's the higher classification.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, if it's the mood and will of the majority to approve this, certainly this policy is not in a posture tonight I would think.
I think it ought to be brought back, maybe.
Yeah, if it's the will of the majority to approve this, it don't need to be done tonight.
I agree with you.
Chief, is one of your concerns that if you say have someone that you have to temporarily promote to captain, and then you give them a captain's salary, and then the person comes back from the military, and so you have to move them back down? Like,
If they move, let's take the captain, for instance.
Okay.
If we give this person, money for doing additional duties, he knows up front, if it's a temporary reclassification or acting, either one, he knows when this person comes back, he does not get that pay.
That's right.
Now,
okay.
these hopefully are mature adults, and they know that this money can be taken away from them. This is just,
Let's go back to the drawing board with this. I think that we've had adequate discussion here to determine what the thoughts of the board are and get some of these basic issues resolved here and then bring this back to the board.
can we ask for guidance? In other words, reclassification or acting or exactly what y'all would like to have?
Number one, there's nobody interested here in getting a pay reduction if someone is doing the job of a Class 10 and somebody comes back from the Class 10 on the job and they've been doing the work all along. So I think that you've heard the sentiment of the board, how they feel about this. I'd go back and I'd rework it, bring it back to us.
And it sounds like under C, we're looking for a temporary reclassification, that we're uncomfortable with this 3% and instead looking at the minimum salary of that higher job grade. So that would be one change. Under demotion, I think we're looking at clarifying that this is non-disciplinary. And it sounds like what we've talked about here is that they would maintain their current salary if it was a non-disciplinary demotion at the convenience of the city.
All right, let me make note of that so I can clarify you on that. Let's take a person that's in a grade and step and he's been there for 15 years. Okay? If you say back to the basic level and that next level, he's actually making more money. You see what I'm saying? So there's got to be some percentage or some guidance, because I've got drivers that have been driving for 15 years. Because of the seniority, I don't want to test because it costs money to test. I just take the senior person and say, you're acting lieutenant. All right. Since he's been driving for 15 years, he's making more money than that base salary of that guy he's fixing to take. So if you say, go back to the base salary, he's actually going to get a reduction in pay to do that. So,
and I think you can come up with something around that on the temporary reclassification.
Yeah.
But understanding the temporary reclassification that we've discussed is once that temporary period is over.
it goes back to his original pay.
That's right. But
That's right.
Y'all can continue to work through that on the promotion, on the temporary reclassification, on what the appropriate promotional increase that would be if it perhaps is in addition to the minimum salary of that next grade. And then handle demotion, but I don't think there's been any issues with the transfers. So that appears to be good as is, unless over the next 2 weeks you hear from the board that you'd like us to consider that.
I move that this matter be taken under advisement.
Second.
We have a motion that this be taken under advisement with a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Police Department.
Few matters for your consideration. Number one, request for authorization to purchase 4 new portable radios. This is for the 4 officers that we're fixing to hire. That'll be the additions to the force. This comes from the wireless communication fund that is set aside for those type purchases that won't affect the budget.
I would move that the police department be granted authorization to purchase 4 portable radios from MA-COM Inc. at a total cost of $12,798 of the wireless communication fund line item to fund this purchase.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
I'll do the next 2 together because they're tied together. Over the past several months, we've lost 2 vehicles out of the patrol fleet from fire. As we're waiting on the insurance money to come in from those vehicles that burned, we've been short. So we were trying to come up with a way to get the two vehicles back into the fleet that wouldn't affect the budget. We were able to do that by this. The insurance money was not enough to even buy one car. So we had some money set aside in a restricted account from drug seizure assets. So we're going to take money from that restricted line item and add to the little bit we got from insurance and buy one vehicle to replace one of the burned. There is also another restricted account called the Drug Education Fund fee, where we've got a considerable abundance of funds. We can take money from that, as we have done in the past, and buy a DARE vehicle, take the existing DARE vehicle and put it into the fleet, and that would replace the second vehicle that was burned. DARE would get a new vehicle, which is fine. But that won't cost us anything. Those are restricted funds. And that'll get our two cars back.
Do we have a motion?
Skinning the cat.
I would move that the police department, under state contract, be authorized to purchase one new vehicles. One, a DARE vehicle to be funded out of the
Drug Education
Fund line item. And the other, a state contract vehicle, to be funded by the insurance repayment plus the necessary supplement from the
drug
forfeiture line item.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Does that get it?
Yes, sir.
A motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the meeting be closed to determine whether or not the executive session should be declared.
Do we have a second to that